Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality.
Hey, Kate Valentine, how are you today?
I'm fine, Fahrusha. I'm sorry. I was just leafing through the notes of this very fascinating guest that we will be speaking to later.
Yes, indeed. And today, for all of you listeners out there who will be listening at a different time, we are recording this on December 1st, 2015. And we've just come off the great high of having two other great guests in this past month of November, Greg Bishop and my friend Todd Robbins. And we've been getting a lot of really good feedback from those shows. And now, today, we have a wonderful woman who is going to join us in a moment. She is P.M.H. Atwater, and she is a person who has been a pioneer in the area of near-death experiences, both as an actual experiencer and a researcher since approximately 1978. Prior to that, she was involved with consciousness studies in a variety of ways. And then she had 3 near-death experiences herself, and it brought her to specialize in that particular field. In addition, she has written a lot of different books, and rather than give you a rundown of each and every book, we are going to give her the opportunity to talk about her books, and she can mention any and all of them during the next hour. So now, let me introduce P.M.H. Atwater.
And welcome to the show.
Hi, I hope you can hear me.
Oh, we can.
Oh, goody. Oh, goody.
So, really, I was going through all these pages about your life. It's really quite complicated and interesting and just full of turns and surprises, and you've had a very interesting life.
Could for those people who are not familiar with the near-death experience precisely, could you, I know you're tired of talking about your own experiences, but just as an introduction, just give a short synopsis of what happened to you. And then we will get directly into your very fascinating research with both adults and children who are near-death experiencers.
Well, I died 3 times in 3 months in 1977. I look back at it and I call it the heavenly sledgehammer effect. If that doesn't tell you how stubborn I was before that, I don't know what will. 2 deaths occurred in January of 1977 and the third in March. Later that fall, I had 3 major relapses. So 1977 wasn't my year.
But you're still here with us in 2015, so you made a big comeback, I see.
Well, after it was over, I had to relearn how to stand, how to crawl, how to walk, how to climb stairs, how to tell the difference between left and right, see properly, hear properly, and rebuild all my belief systems. You know, when people talk about the near-death experience, they don't realize anymore, because of all of the television and the documentaries and all of this kind of thing, that most of these cases come from violence or trauma. So you've got a body to rebuild afterward.
Yes, indeed.
And imagine having to rebuild your body on top of having to somehow come to terms with what you experienced. And so for most people that, you know, you talk about your radio show being called Shattered Reality. For most people, that's a shattered reality.
That would be.
I mean, you know, it just blows any concept they have of their body, of their soul, of their life. of God, of the whole thing is just blown wide open. And they come back absolutely most of them, I say the vast majority, come back absolutely knowing, positively knowing that there's no such thing as death, that it's simply a doorway you walk through or glide through, and that life goes on and has always been and always will be, that we are a soul that resides within our body, you could call it, the jacket we're wearing. And they come back with a very different view of things. Most of them, I'd say easily about, maybe 2/3 of the near-death experiences involve an out-of-body component. That's one of the elements. And once you're out of your body, you have 360-degree vision, and you're much larger outside the body than inside. So they're having to deal with that, and it's like, wow, it's like overkill. Yeah, it's like way much. And it's for children, it's a little slightly different because they don't necessarily have that concept of what life is. So when they come back with their experience of life on the other side, it's not the boundary just is fuzzy. It just isn't there, depending on the age of the child, where for an adult, there is a boundary. We know, the difference between, supposedly we know, the difference between life and death. So you've got all this stuff to deal with. And in my 3 experiences, I wasn't any different than anybody else. I'll tell you, for a decade before I ever died, now, and I'll tell you folks this because you can't really share this kind of stuff with all radio shows, but okay, I'll tell you, my first near-death experience was primarily an out-of-body experience, only it had other components. And my second and third were long and very complex, and it involved many, many components. And a lot of depth, and a lot of depth.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
misheard that.
And before I ever died, that decade before, I had discovered, psychic phenomena and altered states of consciousness. I was dehaunting houses, I was doing that kind of thing. I was a ghost dehaunter. I started Inner Forum, a nonprofit metaphysical corporation, the first in the state of Idaho.
Wow.
I started Idaho, the Northwest first Speakers Bureau for metaphysical people and subjects and this kind of thing. And I was working with people by the hundreds and thousands. And we would have actual experiments. Does prayer work?
Yes.
How can we experiment with prayer? We did experiments with biorhythms. We did experiments with psychokinesis, and on and on and on. And,
Sure.
I just can't begin to tell you how involved I was.
In consciousness.
Absolutely. And just back then I was working for a bank.
Oh, wow.
And during coffee breaks, I'm almost ashamed to say this, but during coffee breaks, I would put a pen in my hand and tell it to roll over, and it would roll over. So I became, what should I say? A major,
active?
well, certainly that, but I became a gee whiz for the banking staff. This is coffee break, so I'm entertainment. I'm rolling all kinds of things off my hand, and just by command. And so I was just doing all this kind of stuff, and always, always, always experimenting, because for me, I had to verify. It wasn't enough. Never was it enough that I could do anything. But I had to be able then to verify that with others. Could they do it? What was it like when they did it? And I could observe it, or, have their comments. And with that group, then other groups and ages and different kinds of people. So even back then, I was just tearing the whole world apart, finding out what this stuff was, how it worked, why, what, all these kind of things. I put out a newsletter. We had monthly meetings. There were usually nearly 100 or more that would attend. Wow. Lots of stuff in the newspaper. I mean, this was really big. And then I reached a point. I've been doing this for like over 10 years, and got to the point where I had a comfort level with all of this. Comfort in the sense that I had a sense of what was involved, how people responded, and what could come of that. And then I reached this point in my own growth and my own learning and my own experiencing where, it's this incredible point where you come to terms with who you are, and what you're doing, and you come to realize that there's a new teacher. The time is ready. That you've graduated this plane, this offering. It's now time for something more. It's sort of like the old saying: when the student is ready, the teacher will come. Right. And I had that really solid. I mean, I really felt ready to move on to something more. So I was expecting a teacher. That is to say, someone wearing a body. Yes. Yeah. I got deaf instead. Oh. My teacher was deaf.
I want to.
I died.
I want to ask you a question here, PMH.
Yeah.
In our correspondence to have you come on, I have mentioned to you that, I've had some out-of-body experiences, and that I felt there is some correlation. And frankly, in my own life, there have been times we had Natalie Sudman on here earlier in the year, and she is also a near-death experiencer. And there have been times I'd said to myself, wow, it might be really cool to experience this. And then I remember that along with that comes bodily pain and possibly injury. And I say, cancel. I don't want that. Thank you kindly. But,
hun. Don't ever say cancel, because you cancel your cancel. You always say
cancel one. Okay.
Always say cancel, reject.
Cancel, reject. Okay.
Your brain understands that. Don't ever
take that to heart. But my question is for you. Can you possibly detail quickly the difference from an ordinary out-of-body experience, if there is such a thing, to the difference between that and a
non-body experience,
near-death experience? Because
I can. In fact, I used to train people in how to take them. I became an out-of-body trainer. And I did that for years. Yes, there is a difference. Certainly you can have very intense, very dramatic out-of-body experiences. You can have testimonials. You can have verification of what you find, what you see, what you do. Yes, but with the near-death experience, it's even more vivid and more intense. Once you get out of the body, you have 360-degree vision. and it seems somehow, at least to me, more emotional, more involved, deeper. It just seems to be more intense than what you can have before that.
More hyper real. I think that was
yeah, it's hyper real. Hyper real would be a very good way to put that. Because I certainly have that before and after comparison, and especially having worked with so many hundreds and thousands of people before I ever died. And we did a lot of out-of-body training. I became a trainer myself. And, there was just a lot of examples from my own life, other people's lives. So once I became a near-death researcher, then I could go back to what I did before I died, and I could call that forward. In other words, I could call forward the research I did way back then,
right.
and that became a decided advantage for me in near-death research. I'm the only near-death researcher I know of who had extensive background in out-of-body states, consciousness studies, altered states of consciousness, before I ever went into near-death research. Add to that my own 3 near-death experiences. So I then tend to stand out in that regard as being more experienced in the very things that people discover once they leave their body.
What they discover?
In a near-death experience.
Can we go over what they might discover?
There are 4 main elements that I'm searching for words here that
can be a part of it,
or a sequence.
I need to bring forth words here. That most of them have. So if we're looking at the millions of near-death experiences which have occurred, and the estimate globally is 4 to 5% of the standard population globally has had a near-death experience. So we're talking about millions and millions and millions and millions of people. Of that larger venue, the major elements, I would say that the first and foremost is the out-of-body experience.
Right.
Most people have that. The second most common element is that light. And that light, of course, is the average adult will describe that light as brighter than 10,000 suns. Mm-hmm. Instantly you're fried, but there's no pain. Mm-hmm. And there's something about this light that is so loving and so caring that you just simply kind of melt in its presence. It knows all about you. It knows your name. It knows, everything you've ever done. So you can't lie to this light. You can't make anything up. You can't, extrapolate in any way. I mean, there it is. The third most common is is a visitor of some kind.
Another being.
Yeah, usually it's a loved one who's died and gone on before. This includes pets as well. There's a lot of animals that are in near-death experiences. A lot of birds, a lot of animals. So you can be.
I don't want to go to heaven if there's no animals there.
Yeah, they're there. You don't have to worry about that. Some people are met by a light being. Some people are met by an angel. Some people are met by a religious figure. It's different, in different parts of the country, different people, different parts of the globe. The fourth most common is the life review. And that can be your life flashing by like a movie, or it's like going into a theater and watching a movie, or it can be a reliving of the life. It can be just parts of the life. This one person went into this very large, huge room, lots and lots of shelves all the way around. And on each, on all of the shelves were television sets, lots and lots of television sets. And each one was tuned to a different aspect of her life. And she could then choose which television set she wanted to go into. So that was one person's way of describing the life review. Then we have the more radical life reviews, where you view or relive everything you've ever done, and then are held accountable for that in some way. A lot of near-death experiencers will say that it's very objective, that there's no pain involved, there's no fear involved, but rather a dispassionate viewing so that you will learn from this. Mm-hmm. But other near-death experiencers say, forget that. It's very painful. Oh, sure. And you can have the more radical kind. I had one experiencer in Chicago, interestingly enough, Chicago, Illinois, a man who had been a criminal, more of the mafia type criminal, harmed a lot of people, killed some people, and he had a near-death experience. When he, in his life review, not only did he have to see everything he'd ever done, he had to live through everything he'd ever done, but he had to live through the pain of anyone he ever hurt or killed, plus the pain of their families and what they suffered because of what he did to their loved one. Uh-huh. So it's sort of like double-decker pain. And he was so traumatized after his experience that all he could, he told me he wanted some way of making up to the world for what he had done. And so he was working in a soup kitchen in the basement of a church. Oh my. That's all he could do. So those are the main ones. Let me ask you now, please notice I didn't mention tunnel.
True that some people get the life review when they're simply threatened with death, even when they haven't had a near-death experience, insofar as, like, if you are in an accident that is just you have averted bodily pain, but you think that you're about to hit a truck, that your life can flash before your eyes. Is that not something that can happen?
That's absolutely true. Some researchers call that a fear-death experience, but mostly in the field that's called a near-death-like experience. Okay. You do not have to die to have a near-death experience. You need somehow to be near death, in close proximity to death, or we have some that are absolutely confounding. And let me give you an example of some of those. Right. And these are also near-death-like experiences. There was this one woman. It was a Sunday morning. She went out on her front porch to pick up the Sunday paper. Those papers are very large. And she was just picking up, it was very early in the morning, she was just picking up the paper, writing her body as she did, because she had to bend over. So she's becoming right again. And she looked straight into the rising sun. And she entered the sun. She went right into the sun. And in doing so, she had a full near-death experience with all of the pattern of physiological and psychological after effects. You see, this is how you tell, is the after effects. If they had a legitimate or a real experience, is the after effects.
This type of experience correlate to a revelatory experience, like this near-death-like experience, and then putting it side by side to a revelatory experience where the person may have some sense of going out of body, but some things are revealed to the person without them ever having had an actual death.
Well, certainly that can be a breakthrough experience. That can be an awakening experience. We have lots of names for that. What I've discovered in my work, I've been doing this for almost 40 years. What I've discovered in my work is that near-death experience is not any kind of anomaly, but rather part of the larger genre of intense transformations of consciousness. Right. Whether they be, baptism of the Holy Spirit, vision quest, a mountaintop experience, you name the baptism of the Holy Spirit, you name the different kinds, but they all fall under that same genre heading of intense transformations of consciousness or threshold experiences. Right. And I'm going to, I'm going to be writing a lot more about what I've discovered about threshold experiences, because that's what I feel they all are. We get so excited about near-death experiences because most of them happen in a hospital, maybe in an accident scene where there are trained professionals that are there. There's a lot of machinery that's there that they can hook these people up to. So therefore, our modern researchers, our modern doctors and nurses, they have a legitimate experience that's above and beyond their training, but they can validate it because it happened within their protocol. Right. So, back in the good old days, we used to call this a mystical revelation, or, it was a light experience. Now they call it a near-death experience, but it's all in the same genre. And again, you always go back to the after effects. You can't talk about any given experience without also talking about the after effects, or you're just talking about half of the story. Okay. You have to talk about the whole story in order to be, for it to be real.
Okay, well, sort of to finish up, I'm afraid we interrupted you before. I think the last phase was the tunnel. You were starting to talk about? I was bringing to your attention of these 4 major elements. Right.
That I said, notice tunnel was not one of them.
Oh, it was not one of them.
Not one of them. There's not that many people that experience a tunnel. We can have cities, we can have all kinds of complex near-death experiences, but the tunnel is not one of the major elements. There's not that many people that experience it.
5%, 7%, 10%?
Well, back in 1982, Gallup Poll did their first scientific study of near-death experiences. And then, what was it, about 9%, 6%, 9%, something like that, had a tunnel. It wasn't until the media sensationalized Raymond Moody's first book that you started hearing people using the term tunnel. And now people use that term a lot, but even today, not that many children or adults experience a tunnel. And in other countries in the world, they've never heard of a tunnel. They don't even know what a tunnel is. So I don't think people are lying at all or stretching at all. What I think is happening is that if people encounter any kind of darkness or anything that kind of moves and sort of seems kind of different or unusual, now today we have a term. Thanks to the media, we have a term. It's called tunnel. Okay. So they grab a hold of that term because, you know, these experiences, they're beyond words. What words do you use? So if people run across a term that seems applicable, they'll grab it. And that's what I think is happening here with the tunnel.
I have a couple of questions vis-a-vis that. And one of them is that in your book you mention a dark light, like a purplish or dark light, of a light.
There are there's three major lights. Yes. There's this incredibly raw, piercing, powerful light. Doesn't really have any particular color per se, except a luminosity that is beyond anything you can even describe. Then there's this black light or dark light. Many describe it as having some purple or violet to it. And children really love this kind of light. It's very warm. It's very friendly. It's very safe. There's something very healing and very wise about this dark or black light with maybe some purple in it. Then there's this white light. Some people say it has little tinges of silver or gold in it, but it's very bright white light. And this light is very loving and embracing and enfolding, but there's something very creative and, you know, special about this light. Well, the children, I love kids because they just, you know, they just come straight to the point. And they say, well,
yeah, because
that black light, that dark light, that's mother light.
I see.
And that white light, that's father light. And you know, the mother light and the father light, they come from God's light. And God's light is that raw, piercing light.
Because this is what's most convincing is, you know, adults may or may not imagine things, may or may not be in, you know, little hypoxic states, whatever. But children are honest.
Yeah, they just come right to the point.
Yeah, exactly. And so that, I think, is one of the most convincing ones. I'm sure you saw this movie recently of the, who was it, the Parsons or the Ministers or something. Son died and went to heaven, had a long conversation with...
Is this Todd Burpo story?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yes, Colton Burpo.
And that was supposedly based on an actual...
It was absolutely accurate, totally accurate, except for the book.
Okay.
The movie itself is wonderful.
Okay.
It's exactly what happened. It gives you the boy's words. Mm-hmm. You get the full presentation of what this boy went through and what the family went through. Mm-hmm. If you read the book, which was written by Colton's dad, who was a Methodist minister, then you get the dad's words, the dad's explanation, and the dad's theory.
And I read the book. Go figure. I didn't see the movie. I read the book.
See the movie, you get the kid's view. Okay. Read the book, you get the dad's view.
Mm-hmm. But that to me is fascinating. I mean, the children have it, does reincarnation at all play into this? Because, I mean...
No, very seldom. Once in a while, you get a little bit of that. I read across a few cases where that did, but very, very seldom. Afterward, when people are dealing with the after effects, some begin to embrace the theory of reincarnation. I would say maybe 30, 40% do. But not all of them at all. In fact, not even half.
Well, it would make sense. I mean, if you had a disembodied soul and they actually enjoyed this life, had a good life, and perhaps they decided they wanted to experience it one more time. I mean, I don't know. You know,
well, they have a very different way of viewing that. And I think we can get a sense of that if we look at the main words that most of them say afterward. And that's just 4 words. Always there is life. Most of them will say that. Wow. Always there is life. Wow. When they come back. And if you really, really look at those words, it means there's no before life. There's no now life. There's no afterlife. All there is we have always existed. We exist now. We always will exist because eternity is our home.
Well, what if we substituted the word consciousness for life?
Well, you can do that. They
Does that change anything? Well, that's not what they say. I see.
That's not their concept. That's our concept.
I'll tell you,
those non-experiencers viewing it.
Well, as far as
that would be your concept.
Yeah, but that if you do, study in biology and so on, life is one of the most difficult things to describe. Everyone supposedly knows what it is. Obviously, you know what it is when it isn't there. But it's very, very difficult to describe. I mean, anything that words, any adjective you use can be applied to something else. So it's very
well, they don't have words. I mean, the words aren't necessary anymore.
Exactly
it's a feeling, it's a knowing, it's a presence.
Yeah.
And so some of them, especially researchers, will use the term consciousness, but most of them use life.
The actual experiences use the word life, and the researchers use the word consciousness. I think that maybe, and I don't know about you, but myself as a person who's looked into such things, I would not call myself an official researcher, but I am a researcher for myself. And I think of it as consciousness because life to me has something to do with being a respirating entity, a being that is respirating, metabolizing, having a physical life. Whereas a consciousness, you don't need to eat or
sleep,
respirate or sleep, and those type of things. But actually, that's kind of mincing words. What I'd really like to talk.
No, I don't feel that way at all.
You don't feel like it's mincing words? I don't mean to. I want, if you want to speak to that, please do. But I have 2 further important questions that I wanted to put to you.
Really quickly, though, this is P.M.H. Atwater, the author of many books about near-death experiences. We have to know who the audience
in case
wants
somebody comes in the middle of this
and
somehow.
says, who is this?
And get on my website. Get on my website, www.pmhatwater.com.
Thank you.
Good. And we're going to give you more time towards the end of this broadcast to mention a number of your books and anything else you would like to mention.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
But, basically, I think my question is part. It's 2 questions, but it's a bigger construct of one thing. That is how much I'm going to ask both parts, and you can speak to them.
Okay.
How much does what people experience end up being what they might expect to experience versus something entirely different? And I know of some cases where people have changed religions as a result of a near-death experience. So I know it can go either way with that. But I'd like you to speak to that, and then I would also like you to tell us maybe a typical good experience, which I think, if I am quoting you correctly, is about 85% of the near-death experiences are positive and non-frightening, whereas about 15 are negative. And maybe you could give us what might be likely a negative, a typical negative experience.
Well,
it's a big question. Sorry.
I wish you'd have asked it one at a time. So let's go back to the first one.
The first one, okay. The first one was how much it does what the person.
Oh yes. Oh, okay. I'm with you. Okay, I'm with you. I'm going to say very few cases involved what they expected. Most cases are a complete surprise. Cool. They are not what you would expect. And that's what blows people's minds. That's what surprises them. Now, in describing what they went through afterward, I've seen many people then take language, culture, what they're familiar with to describe what they could not have described. So in the description of these experiences, you run across language constraints, you run across cultural constraints. But if you go to the experiencer themselves and have them talk about their experience and observe what they're doing with their body as they're speaking, you will not come across expectation. That's seldom found. It's a surprise. Okay. The only time that I've come across expectation is when the person tries to explain it using their language and their culture. Okay. That's the only time I've run across that. So when we're talking about the unpleasant experience, please don't use positive, negative. Those are judgmental terms and they don't fit. In my research base, 1 out of 7 were the unpleasant or hell-like near-death experience. Most people say it's very rare. I say, no, it's not that rare. Most people will not talk about it because either they're embarrassed or they don't want to talk about it, or for whatever reason, they won't share. They did share with me, however. Let me give you an example of positive negative. This was a large hall. I was talking about my research and the near-death experience. And when I was through, I asked for anyone in the audience who has had a near-death experience and not talked about it, if they would like to come up to the microphone and share their experience. 2 people volunteered, a man and a woman. The man was first. I would guess his age to be maybe early 30s. And his description of a heaven-like experience was so incredibly beautiful. There was hardly a dry eye in the room. And then he shocked everybody by saying, and with great verbiage and strength, that this was the worst thing that ever happened to him. He felt cursed to have had this experience. He wished it had never happened. It was the worst thing that ever happened in his life. It was negative, negative, negative.
Did he say why?
Because it messed up his life.
Oh, okay.
Then right away, a woman popped up, the other volunteer, and she started sharing her experience. And it was dark and foreboding, the place that she was in. There was a lot of thunder. There was high winds. It was dark and cold. And she was in a whirlpool, trying and fighting to get out of that whirlpool to get to the shore. She had to save herself. She was being sucked down into this whirlpool. And it was terrible. It was horrible. And she fought and fought and fought. And she finally made it to the shore and pulled herself out of the water. And again, she shocked everybody. I'll never forget this night. She shocked everybody by saying this was the best thing that ever happened to her. She felt blessed to have had this experience because it showed her, it proved to her that no matter what happens in life, you can get out of it. You can rescue yourself, that you can find another way, a better way. So here's a man who had a spectacularly beautiful experience, who hated it. Here's a woman who had a horrible experience and loved it. And I learned that night never to use the terms positive, negative. It depends on the individual and their interpretation, how they feel about what happened to them. And you're going to find this over and over and over again. You can't jump to conclusions about any of this stuff. It all depends on the after effects and how the person handles the after effects. It depends on how they interpret it. And it's their interpretation, not your interpretation. And we have to be so careful of that. And so what I found with a lot of these, about 50% in my research base that had the more hell-like experience, about 50% of them use that as an impetus in their life to turn their life around and make significant changes in their life because of what they went through. But the other 50% did not. And they concluded that you know, there was heaven, there was hell on the other side, and that the other side was a difficult place. And I found in tracking these people over time that they became more nervous or upset, more sensitive and easily upset afterward. Many of them developed health problems because of this. And
they thought they were going to go to hell. Maybe that's the reason.
Well, no. How do I put this into words? It became kind of a depression or a worry thing for them afterward. And, you know, it just was very, very difficult for them, life in general. And then, you know, for the others, the more heaven-like experience or the more uplifting type of experience, for them, most of them, the health became better over the time. They became more positive over time. They became smarter, literally smarter. By the way, that's one of the after effects. After a near-death experience, the average person, the intelligence improves afterward, especially with children. You know, you got to realize that in most of these cases, the vast majority are showing no vital signs at all, no breath, no heartbeat, no brain waves,
flatlining.
Yeah, they're absolutely flatline. For the average is from 5 to 20 minutes. Now that's average.
Wait, hold on. The near-death experience lasts 5 to 20 minutes?
That's average. Yeah, well,
really?
They're dead.
So then some are longer.
That is to say, a corpse flatline from 5 to 20 minutes. Now we know medically that the brain needs oxygen
And glucose.
With 3 to 4 minutes, or there's brain damage.
Right.
Yes, in some cases, there is some brain damage. In the vast majority of cases, there is brain enhancement. Rather, they become smarter. And you see this with children especially. They have jumps in intelligence that's just off the wall.
Oh, okay. So on some of the near-death experiences that occur in hospitals, they are being monitored at the time the person dies or flatlines.
That's right.
And so on some of the monitoring machines, oxygen saturation would be down to 0. I mean, like it would show that there was no because
there's no oxygen. There's no
for 20 minutes.
There's no brain. Many of them, or some of them, overnight. 12 hours out, 24 hours out. The longest stay corpse, as near as we can tell, was 3 days.
Really?
And that's the case of George Rodanaya. And George Rodanaya was killed by the communist KGB and rushed to a hospital in Tbilisi, Georgia. Now, it's true, we don't know the temperature of the freezer vault his body was stored in.
But still, without oxygen, without circulation, there's what they call the blood-brain barrier. And if you didn't have proper blood pressure, you're not getting oxygen. You're just not getting oxygen. So, it was just interesting. The term that you used, 3 days, I mean, of course, you think of the resurrection of Christ.
Well, for him, it was 3 days.
Yeah, interesting.
And, his body was pulled out for autopsy.
Yeah,
one of his uncles was on the autopsy team. They did the T-cut, splitting him open at the bottom, then starting to come up the chest when his eyes open. Then,
oh, boy.
This is not that unusual. They simply closed his eyes and kept cutting.
Seriously?
He opened his eyes again. They didn't think anything of it. They kept cutting, closed his eyes and kept cutting. And he opened his eyes the third time. And by then, the chief operating physician stepped back, jumped back, and had to take a month vacation. He couldn't handle it. And when George, when you die, the tongue swells and fills up the mouth cavity.
Right.
So they had to wait 3 days before he could speak. Before the tongue
came back to life?
returned to normal functioning and was smaller, and then he could talk. And he then told what happened to him, what he saw, and fantastic stuff, all verified, even with his wife, what this guy did when he was supposedly dead. Well, was dead, but, he came back. And we have cases like that. His is the longest that I know of.
Well, what you're saying is...
run across cases similar to that.
Well, what you're saying is just not only that the man came back to life, but every cell in his body also came back to life.
Yeah, he came back. He came back.
Well, that would certainly...
Look, my dear, read my book, Near-Death Experience.
No,
it's
just that I would say that certainly physiology has to be rewritten.
Yes. So now you understand why the medical community has such problems with the near-death experience.
It would indicate that a lot of the parameters are not correct.
Here is what we are consistently finding medically. When a person is dead, that is to say, no vital signs, They can still have an out-of-body experience, clear, enhanced consciousness, self-identity with emotions, cognition, thought perception, full use of faculties, and intact memories. Totally. And we have now been able to prove this, verify this in clinical studies. And it's in Lancet Medical Journal.
Yeah, it's really been reported constantly, and I can't think of the fellow's
All
name.
of this when the brain is not working, when the body is not working.
Duality of what he invented the XY graph and all. What the hell was his name? The philosopher.
Can't help you. Can't help you.
I know, but anyway, his whole sort of basis of philosophy was the duality of life, the mind and body, and soul and matter. And you're indicating that the source of energy on the various cells of the body is indeed, for want of a better term, the soul, and not the actual, let's say, oxidation of glucose or ATP going to ADP, but actually some sort of a life force that inhabits all these cells. And because certainly we are more than the sum of our parts.
That's right.
Interesting.
Otherwise,
Very interesting.
We're just meat puppets. We're just robots with no consciousness, which is obviously the case.
We are living, breathing, active beings. We are a soul.
Before we ask you to mention all your books and so forth, we have that one final question, which I warned you about because my partner here, Kate, is had a wonderful show on the radio called the Kate Valentine UFO Show, and we are both experiencers of the UFO phenomena, and as a result of that, a number of our listeners are very interested in the UFO and the alien question. So we know that you have something to say on that behalf, and before we say goodbye and have you give us a number of your book titles and all the kind of contact stuff that we'll do towards the end of this, could you please give us a little information?
Well, I did run across a few cases, UFO, alien existent related, with both children and adults. Not that often, but there are some. I can give you some stats here with adult near-death experiencers based on 3,000 cases.
Okay.
Identified with being from another planet, 20%.
Wow.
So afterward, they identified as being from another planet. Claimed to have been abducted by a UFO, 9%. Now, here's with children, 277 cases. Identified with being from another planet, only 9%. Identified with being from another dimension, 39%.
Wow.
Claimed to have been abducted by a UFO, 14%.
Amazing.
So you do run across some of this, but you don't run across a lot of it.
That's a fair amount. I mean, that's certainly statistically significant, as they say.
Yes, I believe so, too. So why don't you now give us a little rundown on your
website?
Your website and a number of the names of the books. You have so many of them. You've been so prolific and wonderful researcher. So give us some of that so our readers, our listeners, can become your readers as well.
Okay. Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
Well, just one quick question.
Sure.
In one of your biographies, it said that if you had not had a handwriting analysis, you might never have become a writer. And
That's right.
And I thought there are no coincidences in this world, right? How did you happen to get that handwriting analysis?
From a sheriff's deputy.
Really? I'll be darned. And it was just what happens.
Yeah, I was raised in a police station. I've been around, this kind of thing. And I was working as a secretary at the time, and I was sick of it. I didn't want to be a secretary. I was a good one. I was proud of my work, but I didn't like my work. I wanted to be something else.
Okay.
And I didn't know what else to be. So I had this opportunity to submit a paragraph of my handwriting to the sheriff's deputy because he was studying graphoanalysis.
Okay.
And he wrote me back later on, and he said I showed number one. He said I was not happy in my work.
Okay.
I needed to get out of there. He said your handwriting shows strong literary ability. You should be a writer.
Huh.
Wow.
And I thought the guy was cracked. I never did anything like that in my life.
Wow.
My way of dealing with this kind of thing was either to go to the Bible and just open it at random. So I went to the Bible and it said, for those who knock, the door is opened. And I took it literally.
Sure.
I would even stop people in the street and go up to them and introduce myself and say, do you know anything about writing? Do you know any writers, any writers clubs? And the third person I stopped did. He knew the president of the local writers club. And I called her and asked if I could visit. And so I went to visit, and I felt like I had stepped off the planet Earth and onto another planet, because everybody was so enthused and creative and active and happy. And I'd never been around people like that before. So I applied, and I was accepted as a member.
And the rest is history.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, let's hear the fruits of your labors, so to speak.
Tell us again your website. We've been speaking to PMH Atwater. Now, your website and your books. And certainly you've been a wonderful guest, and I know that you have a lot of information, and we hope you'll come on again at some time in the future.
Sure, I'd love to.
Hey,
I get a little tight sometimes, so I apologize for that. I apologize
future
for
memory and all. Yeah.
Future memory.
First of all, my website, www.PMHAtwater.com. I have a free monthly newsletter. Please, if you're curious and you want to know about all kinds of things, sign up for my newsletter. Please notice on the home page, I'm asking right away, call for volunteers. My new project, I'm reprising my work with children, only this time I'm focusing on womb to the age of 5. If you think you fit that, download that and follow the directions. It's not a quiz, just follow the directions. It's written up to help you remember way back when. So participate in my research if you can. A summary of my research is near-death experiences, the rest of the story. Future Memory certainly is a book like none other. It is a labyrinth. It's not a book. The voice that spoke to me in my third near-death experience, the one who told me to be a researcher, spoke to me again when I was trying to put together this kind of book. And it said, turn it into a labyrinth. I will show you how. And I had it all done in 2 weeks, and then it was published. Every sentence, every paragraph, every page is part of the math I use to create the labyrinth format. It is a real labyrinth. You read through it like you walk through a sight labyrinth. In other words, you can't skip ahead. You can't read you can't go to the end first. You can't skip around.
No
you have to stay on the path like a real labyrinth. It'll go back and forth with you. The purpose of the book is to bring your consciousness up to the next highest level possible for you. The book is a brain changer. It is actually a psychotronic device.
Wow.
So you've got that one. You got Children of the Fifth World, which I'm examining evolution in our times, what is happening to the human race. You've got near-death experiences, or the new children and near-death experiences, which is a lot about my original work with children. Dying to Know You, that's my most recent. Dying to Know You, Proof of God in the Near-Death Experience. There's no other book like it on the market. It consists of the summation of over 5,000 voices, children and adults who've had a near-death experience, who are telling you what they went through, their truth, their way. So it is the collective experience spoken in the collective voice from the collective. And there's no other book like it on the market. It's just Dying to Know You, Proof of God in the Near-Death Experience. There's a little bit of research in it, not much. There's a couple of stories in it, not many. It is all filled with the experiencer's truth. So if you want to know about that from over 5,000 people, you get that book.
Terrific. Wow.
Thank you so much.
Wow. Yeah, obviously we'll have to have you on again. This is just touching the
well,
surface.
this is fun.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And
Well, thank you.
Goodbye from Shattered Reality. We are going to now just wrap things up here with saying that, please, listeners, we value your comments. We are also looking for your personal experiences of any sort that are paranormal. If you'd like to tell them to us, if you'd like to have a short segment on the show.
Of how your reality was shattered.
Exactly. And also, we do have a young lady coming up who is writing up her experiences, multiple experiences of bilocation. She is a listener, and she is currently penning a page or two. She is a foreign. Her native language is not English, and she prefers to have me read the bilocation experiences, which is coming up hopefully on our next show. But before we say goodbye, I wanted to mention that one of our previous guests, Mr. Paul H. Smith, Ph.D., I should call him Dr. Smith, formerly of the formerly a major with the U.S. Army and retired. And he has written a new book, which he mentioned on the podcast with us, and it has come out, and I want to give it a little plug here because I think it's an excellent book. It is called The Essential Guide to Remote Viewing, the secret military remote perception skill anyone can learn. And that's Dr. Paul H. Smith. And so we're going to basically wrap it up now.
Yeah, I think so. Okay.
Okay. So we want to hear from you, too. Yeah. This is Fahrusha.
And here's Kate Valentine.
And we are
Shattered Reality. Let's see you next time.
Okay, very good.